This is a video about tips for the first year player draft in out of the park baseball. And here I am in my Orioles simulation. I'm in the year 2025, and this is the draft for this year. And I figured going through some picks and looking at some draft picks might be the best way to talk about some tips for drafting because it can be so specific to the year, the players, your team, etc. So, just some general ideas and tips on how I think through the draft as I draft players, I thought might be the best way to go through this. A few things to get out of the way first. Make sure you have a scout that you trust. Here's my scouting director, and he's outstanding at scouting amateurs, which I really wanted as I was trying to rebuild the Orioles. So get a guy you can trust because you're going to want to rely on his ratings of players, his scouting ratings, and also his recommendations for the draft. Another pretty basic thing that you're going to want to make sure is just your draft budget, which you can set in the off season. As you can see here, I set 10 million, and my recommended draft slots amount is 9.6 million. So I have a little bit to go over the recommended slot amounts if a guy wants more than slot. But I typically will stick the draft budget near the recommended slot amounts. You might want to do it differently depending on where you're at in a rebuild or how much you're investing in your major league roster that year, etc. So I play with the draft budget as well as the international free agent budget, and I don't normally have this at zero. That's a 1 year thing, and it really depends on where the rest of my budget is as a team and how much I have to spend, but I'd recommend keeping this right around it. And my recommended draft slot amounts is pretty high this year because I have 2 picks in the supplemental first round. And so getting over to the draft here, another thing that you might want to do is here when we look at the draft pool, which is the screen you'll use a lot, a screen like this that you'll use a lot as drafting. I have these rows set up to the things I most want to know about before clicking on a player to look at the specifics. And you can do that. You can customize rows here. And I have a video in as part of my tutorial playlist called Stat Rows that you can look at if you want more specifics on how to customize these rows. So potential, overall rating, and really potential is what are super important, obviously. And then I have work ethic, intelligence, and leader ability here too. These aren't things, these are kind of more tiebreakers / context, not things I'm going to make a pick based off of. But work ethic and intelligence high in those areas makes a player more likely to fulfill or exceed his potential. And it's always good to have leaders in the clubhouse. And then obviously their bonus demand is pretty important and how signable they are. And the scouting accuracy, I wouldn't worry about the difference between average and high too much from what I've read about. This is new this year in Out of the Park 21, this scouting accuracy stuff. And they redid a lot of the scouting. And I read there was one study in the Out of the Park boards, which I tried to find so I could reference it in here, but I couldn't find it. And so I could leave the link. But anyways, it found that there isn't a huge difference between the accuracy from average to high, or really in a lot of the differences in your scouting accuracy. So obviously we prefer it to be high or very high, but I'm not gonna I guess hesitate to pick a guy just because I have average scouting accuracy on him. So, and then I have injury proneness, which isn't a huge deal to me, but again, just a thing that adds context and really clicking on the player, which we'll get into, and looking at the nuts and bolts of the ratings and all that is going to be the bulk of making the decisions. So I figured before I get into my picks, I go to the mock draft here and look at a few of the first picks and talk through just what I like or don't like about them so you can get a feel for how I think about drafting. So first overall, this guy, Chris Smith, is projected to go. And so potential rating, and I talk about this a lot in my How to Evaluate Players tutorial about ratings. This overall rating is just a guide. Don't take it as how good the player is necessarily going to be. Don't base your picks just off of this. Although I will say in drafting, I use ratings, right? In evaluating minor leaguers, major leaguers, international players, etc., independent league guys, I look at stats first and contextualize that with ratings, which I talk about in my Evaluate Players video. In drafting, I really don't use stats at all, which might be a blind spot of mine. I just haven't found a way where I can make any sense of them, given the guys are coming from all these different places. So anyways, Just that little disclaimer there about that I'm very rating focused, but only in drafting. So Chris Smith here, my scout thinks his ceiling at this point, and he's 22 years old, so it's not like he's 17 and has a wild reach ceiling, is a league average player. 50 is league average. This scale is 20 to 80. But as you can see, OSA scouts think he's going to be a solidly above average player of his potential for his ceiling. And I use the OSA scouts to reality check my scout, but I generally trust my scout before trusting OSA. Although there are times where I'll go with the OSA rating or other reasons where I'll overrule who my scout is suggesting. So what do I like about this guy? Home run power and avoid Ks both looking like they're, if he reaches his ceiling there or even goes beyond the 60, grows more, looks like he could be a really solid power bat who doesn't strike out a lot. The gap power, I don't pay as much attention to gap power. Of these 5 things, it's the one I pay the least amount of attention to. And contact, a little below average. Hopefully he can get that eye up closer to his ceiling and be a solid power hitter who doesn't strike out a lot and makes okay contact. Now, in terms of his defensive ratings, with this double play at 45 and range, if those stay where they are and don't go up, he's really only going to be a corner infielder. He can play third base. I mean, his arm is awesome. And he can obviously play first base. But this isn't a guy that I would put too much faith in playing. Definitely not shortstop. Maybe he could be an okay guy at second base, but I wouldn't want him as my primary second baseman. But another thing you can do is go to the ratings here and look at his outfield ratings. Even if he doesn't have a rating at an outfield position yet, you can see his arm is awesome. He's very short-handed in the outfield. And his range, though, not very good. Again, maybe could pass as like a corner outfielder with that range. But that's an important thing to check here is the defensive ratings of, okay, they have their position ratings here, but where else could they potentially play? So that's the thing to look at. So this guy looks like, corner infielder, maybe passable as a corner outfielder, and maybe could be like your backup second baseman, but first and third base is where this guy's going to be pretty limited to. So let's just look at a couple more of these guys before I get into my pick. Omar Jimenez, this guy's 23, which again, Smith was 22. Just when guys are older, they don't, they're closer to their peak age. They're not going to have as many years to develop. And they're going to be further along here with some of these ratings of their current rating, but they're not going to have as long to reach their potential ceilings. So some things that I like here on Jimenez is extreme ground ball. Always love that. Keeps the ball in the ballpark. I'm the Orioles here, especially. Balls fly out of Camden Yards out of the park, as they do a lot of seasons in real MLB. So I love an extreme ground ball pitcher. I like that a lot. One thing I really don't like here is the fact that he only has 2 pitches right now. So his changeup could develop into an elite pitch, but right now he is 23 years old and it's not a usable pitch right now. So I would really hesitate to take this guy second overall because I might be stuck with a reliever here if that pitch doesn't develop. And he might be a really good reliever. My scout thinks he's a 70 potential, which is an ace. And that's primarily based off of his pitches here, right? An elite curveball, potentially elite changeup, and a really good sinker with everything else average or above average. He'd have solid stuff, really solid movement, and average control if he reaches his potential. Again, 50 being the average, 80 being just the elite of the elite, and 70 being, I know the word elite is overused, but 70 is you're in pretty rare company with a 70 rating. So, and in terms of the OSA, pretty similar. They think he's a 75. They don't think his changeup or control are as good as my scout does at this point, the current ratings, but pretty similar there. I'd hesitate to take this guy given his age and where his changeup is at. If I'm not picking second overall, I might. I like this guy, but at second overall, that's a lot of risk. You're putting a lot of faith in his ability to develop the changeup because if a guy has 2 pitches, he's going to be a reliever for you in the major leagues. You have to have a minimum of 3 pitches in this game to be a successful starter in the majors. Take a look at one more guy here. Connor McGuire, 17-year-old center field prospect. And his range is 65. This dude can play all 3 outfield positions. Let's see if he can play any infield. No, that arm is only 35 at the infield. So, I mean, he could maybe play first base for you some, but who cares? Anybody can play first base for you for the most part. But so he's 17. So, as with any high schooler, the potential for bust is pretty big in that he is so far from his ceiling, and so far from his peak age that there's a lot of a lot of potential outcomes for this player. But man, if he develops, he's awesome. He can play center field. He's gonna have really excellent power, above average contact, eye and avoid Ks, both good. This guy, if you can get a center fielder who can reach anywhere near this guy's ceiling, you're set. Like a guy who can field center field well is crucially important to your team. And then if he can hit too, that is awesome. I would like this guy a lot if I were picking near the top of the draft. I'm not though, unfortunately. So now let's start the draft here. And I will kind of go through some picks. Let's just see who goes first overall here. See who San Francisco takes. Oh, they picked the pitcher who is projected to go second overall, Oscar Jimenez. Let's see if those, and then Chicago picks. Who are they going to pick? Oh, Gil Stapleton, sorry. Going way off the board there. And then let's just see who goes. Oh, and then Chris Smith goes third. Okay. So now I'm going to auto draft until my first pick. Let's go ahead and do that. And so I am picking 27th overall. And the board here, you see all these 75, 80 guys. It's all relievers and closers. Like, who cares? I mean, in some instances, I might draft a reliever in the first round towards the back end if I'm picking late in the first round, but I doubt it here. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to see who does my scouting director recommend. So he recommends Dan Zimmerman, who is actually a catcher that I was projected to take in the mock draft. His bonus demand is way below the slot. The slot is $3.2 million. Bonus demand is $650. So if I were to sign him, I'd have a ton of money left over in my slot pool to sign a guy who's demanding over slot. Maybe there's a really good player left here. Impossible guys we're not going to go after. Maybe one of these guys falls, a 65 starting pitcher, and we can go over slot on him. So that's one thing to think about. And so this is a high school catcher, and his bat looks like it could be awesome. And this is a guy that I looked at before the draft, one of the few players, because I was projected to pick him. But catcher is a position where I have to have a good defensive player. It impacts your pitching staff so much that you have to have a good defensive catcher. And this guy looks like he's not going to be a major league caliber catcher for me. So taking a look at his ratings, this guy, he's a designated hitter, right? And at 18 years old, and I'm really hesitant to take him, even though his bat looks like, he could be one of the best bats in the draft if he develops. He's 18 years old, so he's pretty far from his ceiling. He's well below slot. So what I'm going to do here is, and again, this is kind of, I'll try not to ramble too much, or make this too laborious, but this is me doing it live, and I kind of am a bit meticulous with considering other guys. So the next thing I do is say, okay, dude, to my scout, being the dude, I don't want this catcher. What pitcher do you have for me? And the pitcher that he's going to recommend is this guy who, Wes Bankston, who has a bonus demand of $7.5 million. So already pretty skeptical that I'm going to pick this guy. He's a ground ball pitcher. He's 18. Let's see what OSA thinks he's a 70. My scout thinks he's a 60. Pretty solid player, but I really don't want to blow $7.5 million of my slot on this guy. So other things that I look at is I generally pick the best position available. But if they're shortstop and center field are two positions I'll always look to. So is there a shortstop that he would recommend? Alex Lopez, he wants well below slot at $950. Not really doing much for me there. So now I'm going to say, okay, what center fielder do you have for me? Gene Golden Boy Riddle. Whew. Oh, wow. This is, he has no discipline, but amazing avoid Ks potential. 50 potential according to my scout and OSA. And this guy could play center field. And he's got great work ethic, great intelligence. His personality is that he will bust his tail to become better at his position. So I like this guy. I his eye discipline rating with the concerns me even with the avoid Ks. What else? Can he play any infield position? Yeah, he could get away with playing well second base maybe. And so again, another guy who I don't love here. And sometimes I'll just kind of say, okay, let me, I know if I need a batter, like, oh, well, now he's recommending Chris Purnell as the batter. Let's see. I thought this was going to be the catcher that he was recommending I take. So, second base, Purnell, again, I'm drafting towards the end of the first round. You're not going to get a sure thing here. It's just not going to happen. Um, so let's see what he just in terms of outfielders who the top guy is recommends. Pat Payne, who wants a 1.5 million slot. I kind of like this guy rating wise. Potential rating is a little lower than I would have thought. This guy can definitely play center field. Low leadership, low loyalty, he's adaptable. His mind tends to wander. So, but this guy can play all three outfield positions, which I definitely like. And let's just see if we ask about all pitchers who he recommends. Oh, Bankston, right. And then infielders is Purnell. So he's still recommending Dan Zimmerman. Again, this is why I say trust your scout. Some people might be real meticulous about saying like, let me look at all the batters here, and I'll do this sometimes, but I just don't have the patience for it, to be honest. I do this some, but some guys might do the draft might look through a lot of these players, and I try to trust my scout to save myself that time. So this is another guy. This is the second best hitter on the board according to my scout, who's also 18, and catcher ability is still a 45, which isn't great, and he's not going to play any other position either. So the two top guys available are catchers who don't necessarily have a positional home. And then we get into like Gene Riddle, who is the fourth best guy available, and his bonus demand is really low. I kind of like Riddle, to be honest. Like, he's got huge bust potential with an eye ceiling only at 35, and the avoid Ks, being so young, he's so far from this thing, huge bust potential here. But he's going to be able to play a lot of positions. He's going to be able to play all three outfield positions, and he's going to be an elite fielding center fielder. And infield, he could definitely play second base. I don't think he has the arm / range to play shortstop. He doesn't have the arm for third base. So that's my hesitation there. So basically at this point, I am kind of between Riddle and Zimmerman, I guess. I mean, Zimmerman looks like he could be a beast with the bat. And drafting here at the end of the first round, I think I'm just going to take him. And as much as I hate, but and my hesitation is he's basically a designated hitter or first baseman for me, because I'm not going to have a catcher who's that poor. But if he can hit this well, if he reaches this ceiling, I will happily put him at DH or first base. So I'm going to pick him. I'm going to pick Dan Zimmerman. He's well below slot. I just hit the draft player thing here. I don't offer slot or meet demand. I just wait till all my picks are in to figure all that out and what I want to offer a guy. And so we're going to draft Dan Zimmerman. So all that to draft the guy who my scout had originally recommended. So I'm going to go through a few more picks here just to help maybe talk through some more things that I look for when I draft. But basically, as I was saying when I was looking through that pick, is best player available is generally my strategy, especially early in the draft. Later in the draft, I might look at other things. And there's always things that I contextualize, as you could see as I was talking through there. What's their work ethic and intelligence? What's their age? If they're starting, if they're a pitcher, do they have more than 2 pitches? Can they play shortstop or center field? What other positions can they play? So those are all things I consider. But best player available is the cliche and definitely something that I that I generally abide by. So let's auto pick until my next draft. Oh, and some of these guys are still here. Some of those guys I was considering. So I'm still on all batters. Let's look at all players here. So a bunch of relief arms still available. A pretty good starting pitcher, a couple starting pitchers available here. So let's see who my scouting director recommends. So so he wants me to take that other catcher. And I mean, I love the bats, but I really don't like spending my first two picks on two dudes who are basically DHs or first basemen. So, and let's see what else he's got for me here. Chris Purnell is still out there. His bonus demand is unknown, though, it looks like. Oh, no, his bonus demand is slot. I'm sorry. So I don't really have a lot of attachment to that guy. Let's see what he says in terms of outfielders. I have no idea why he's recommending that guy. That doesn't make any sense to me. And then let's go ahead and look at all batters. He's recommending Purnell, and then all pitchers he's recommending Eric Billis, who is a guy who wants well over slot at 5.5 million, but I can afford that, honestly. I mean, I have 10 million set aside, and I'm well under slot on my first pick. Oh, and the other thing that I did mean to say at the beginning, so the draft order here, just to show where I'm picking. So I picked 27th overall, and then I have these two picks here, supplemental first rounds, because I sent qualifying offers to two guys who rejected them and then signed elsewhere. So this is where I'm picking now. So this is the first round supplemental, which is the 36th pick of the draft, right? So just I forgot to say that. I don't know. I'm a little confused at some of these recommendations that this guy's making. So starting pitcher, he's going to recommend Billis. Batters, he's recommending Purnell. I don't really like Purnell as a option. Outfielders, this is the one that really confuses me. I have no idea why he's recommending this guy. Generally, the scout recommendation, I've never had the scout recommend in the second round a guy who's rated a 20 potential. So I'm going to go to starters here and look at the starters. And this is the guy who's recommending at the 5.5. I could probably sign him, though. There's also this guy who wants well over slot, who has some good qualities. And then there is, of course, Nate Hammond here. Don't love him. Kevin Saunders. That's not a very high ceiling. Which, again, at this point, you're not necessarily going to be getting guys who have a high ceiling at this point. They might be able to develop a higher ceiling as they play, though. This guy, I don't mind. He's 22, though, which I don't like, but he's already developed a bit here in terms of his movement, his stuff. It's not all down at 20. And then he's got some really good pitches. He's already got 3 decent pitches. He's an extreme ground baller. His stamina is such that he can be a starter. His signability is very easy. He wants the slot bonus demand. I like him more than the other pitchers that I've looked at. This would be the guy that I would pick, just because I don't really think this 18-year-old pitcher is worth a $6 million bonus demand. I'm not going to do that to a guy who's 18 and high school pitchers can bust so badly, and it's not like he's an 80 potential, and I should be spending that money on him. So really for me, it's between Schlitt there, and then let's go to the batters, and probably one of these center fielders. So Mike Guzman, who looks like he's an elite fielder. His bat ceiling is not great. I think he might be able to develop into an average hitter with an awesome glove, which is fine, but that's his ceiling, right? Now, OSA is way higher on him than my scout. So if my scout thought this about him, I'd probably be pulling the trigger on him, and I still might. But my scout does not think as much about this dude's hitting. And then Tim Abrams, again, OSA is a good bit higher on him. Really decent fielder, but with that range, he's not going to be a center fielder long term. His range is only at 50. And so let's go ahead and I'm on the OSA, so you got to make sure that you toggle back to your guy. So Gene Riddle, I know, his he's a sure thing. Like, he's a Gold Glove fielder, right? And he can also play infield. And while there are other guys who have more balance between their ratings, with this avoid Ks and contacts, like, he could be a really good on base guy even with a bad eye. And what I like about him is his glove. His glove makes him really playable. So I think I like him more than the other guys. Certainly, I certainly like him as much as Guzman, I think. Guzman, like I'm not big on him. Tim Abrams, I like, not huge on him. To be honest, I think I like this starting pitcher the best, Schlitt. I don't love that he's 22, and he doesn't have a huge ceiling, but his bonus demand is really reasonable. He's a ground baller. He can throw 98. He's got the stamina to be a starter. It's kind of between, do I want to spend on these guys with higher ceilings, or go for more, a more reasonable bonus. This guy's also a ground baller. And OSA likes him even more. So the more I look at Eric Bills, the more I like him, especially that OSA thinks even higher of him, and my scout's already pretty good on him. Ground baller, potential with 3 elite pitchers. He wants like $3 million over the slot, but I think I can work that out. I think I can work out signing him. So I think I'm gonna draft Billis, who, again, coming back, and I'm picking, after meandering through a lot of analysis, I guess I'm just picking the guy my scout recommended. But the more I look at this, the more I like this, and I'm going to spend $5.5 million on him. It's about $3.5 million over slot. Let's do it. And I'm going to come back and pick again in a few picks because of the supplemental round. Oh, and Mike Guzman went to the Padres there. All right. And that was one of the center fielders I was looking at. So let's see who my scouting director recommends for this pick. Mike Headcase Dahlstrom. This is that dude. So, he still wants me to take this guy who's a leader. Other players look up to him. But again, man, I already picked one guy who's who's not good enough to be a catcher. And I love his bat, but I just don't love the idea of picking another guy. Sometimes if you hit this scouting director recommendation a bunch of times, it'll give you another player, but you really don't need to do that in this year's version because you can look through all the positions. So let's see if he picked. So pitcher he recommended Schlitt, who is that ground ball college pitcher who wants a little over slot, about 500,000 over slot, but with easy signability. So immediately that guy jumps out to me because that was the guy I considered with my last pick. And all batters. He's going to recommend Chris Purnell still. I never noticed that if you hit scouting director recommendation and you get a hitter, but then you go to all batters, you get a different guy. I don't think I've seen that before in other drafts I've done. And let's see if recommendation for an outfielder. He's still I don't understand this. Maybe I'm seeing a couple things here as I'm doing this live that I haven't seen in the draft before. I don't know why he's recommending that guy. And so all infielders is probably going to be Purnell, right? Starting pitcher, Schlitt, obviously. Or is it Schilt? Oh, it's Schilt. Sorry, the SCHI. So shortstop, anybody interesting? Still recommending this Alex Lopez guy. And let's just look at the batters list to make sure there's nobody. So Gene Riddle is still there. Again, this is a guy with no eye, no discipline. So for me, it's really between Riddle, who will sign for below slot. His demand's only $650, and the college pitcher Schilt. So let's go ahead and pull him up. I love that he's a ground baller. I mean, this guy could be a major league pitcher. He just doesn't have a huge ceiling, but he's a college pitcher, so he's intelligent and well-spoken, they say. Okay. And so it really just comes down to, do I want to draft a pitcher or do I want to draft a guy who's a center fielder? And I think I'm going to draft this guy. I think he's more of a sure thing. And I think his ceiling is just as high as Riddle, the center fielder. So I am going to go ahead and draft the pitcher. This is not the guy who my scout recommends overall, but he's the top pitcher that he recommends. And he wants a little over slot, so I'm going to need to be careful with it's the last 2 picks that I've picked over slot, so I'm going to have to keep an eye on that here as I move through the rest of my picks. But I'm going to draft Ben Schilt. And then I'll do one more pick here just so this doesn't go on forever, just to kind of show you how I look through it. So I'm going to auto draft my next pick, and let's see, he is recommending, Dahlstrom's still there, this guy, because everybody's like, I mean, like, he can't play any position. He's 18 years old. And so the OSA thinks he's good too, right? Yeah, OSA is really high on him too. I don't know, eventually I'll pick that guy. Maybe this time I'll pick that guy. And then batters, Chris Purnell, still loves Chris Purnell. Yeah, my scout really likes that guy. Pitchers, he likes, this is a starting pitcher. He is so it looks like he's 20 years old. Oh, he's a junior college guy. Okay. Good leader, good loyalty, good work ethic. So that's good. He's very easy to sign. He played against poor competition. Who cares? I don't pay that much attention to that. Maybe I should. His bonus demand is below slot. Ooh, OSA thinks even higher of him than my guy. My guy likes him. As you can see, projects him to be an average major league pitcher, but if he reaches his ceiling with these 3 pitches of 70 fastball, 65, 55, he could be a really good pitcher. Let's just take a look at the batters here at the top. So again, Dahlstrom and Gene Riddle's still here. I kind of like Gene Riddle, to be honest. His bonus demand is below slot. Even though his signability is hard, I'll be able to get him extremely hard. I'll be able to get him to below slot. High school player. He's not going to hit for power, and hopefully his avoid Ks can allow him to overcome his poor eye. And he's going to be able to field, man. And he's really good work ethic, really good intelligence. I've been considering since early. I think now is just the time to pull the trigger on Gene Riddle. All right, let's draft him. All right, so anyways, hopefully that's helpful just to, going through it. I know it's a bit rambly as I kind of didn't really have a set plan because I was going through the draft live, but hopefully the things that I looked at and kind of the way I talked through the players is helpful in terms of how I decide who to pick and how I set up this dashboard, all this, this menu and all that. And if there are any questions, I can always do another video with more stuff if doing this a different way would be more helpful. So you can let me know in the comments or any questions. But yeah, that's all for now.